What's up everybody, Ocho here, and it's going to be episode 3 in our Creativity and Innovation series. Today we're going to break down transformational leadership and talk about why it has a positive influence on creativity. As you may have known, if you're following along, we're kind of breaking down this chart that you can't see very well, but I'll keep on making the document available to you. So let's cover what we've got so far. So far we've gone straight through the middle and talked about how trust influences your connectivity at work, the relationships that you have at work. That connectivity leads to employee thriving through both vitality and learning. And then that thriving is actually going to lead to innovative behaviors, which is going to be part of, or creativity will be part of those innovative behaviors. That was episode 1. Episode 2, we broke down trust into its 2 components, and that's going to be your cognitive and your affective based trust, and we kind of talked about what those 2 are. At the end of that video, I kind of hinted to, in this video, we're going to try and talk about how do you increase problem solving, and a big part of problem solving is your creativity and critical thinking. So we're going to dive into that today. All right, so let's break down transformational leadership and try and take a look at why does that actually have an influence on your employee or the creativity of those who are following you. Let's break it down into its 4 components. Component number 1 is going to be called idealized influence. And really that's just kind of talking, a better way to say it would be charisma. Kind of the role model behavior that a transformational leader shows. All right, the second component of transformational leadership is called inspirational motivation. And what that is referring to is when a transformational leader is able to provide meaning to the work being done by them and their team. The third component is intellectual stimulation. This is referring to when a leader challenges pre-existing assumptions, the status quo, they reframe problems, they help their team see things in a new light. The last component of transformational leadership is individual consideration. This is the individual coaching and mentoring that a transformational leader does with their people. So these 4 components kind of tell us why a transformational leader has such a positive impact on their people, specifically within creativity. If you look through these 4, and we talked about it in episode 2, the team potency. There's going to be an increase in team potency, or the feeling that we believe we're going to succeed. If a leader is a good role model, has a lot of confidence and charisma, and knows what they're doing, that's going to increase this team potency. If the leader is able to provide the meaning to their work, people are going to feel more connected to it and probably put a lot more effort into what they're doing. So you can see how these components feed into that team potency. These 4 components also are going to increase your self-efficacy. If you have a transformational leader, they're coaching and mentoring you, you feel connected to your work, they provide a positive role model to you, they're able to help you and encourage you to challenge the status quo and reframe problems and look at things through a different lens. You have more faith in yourself, you're more efficient yourself, and you're also more effective yourself. So that's going to increase your self-efficacy. You put those 2 together now with also a vision, a good vision of changing the status quo. There's your team now moving forward to solving problems and being more creative, right? So you have a team that believes in themselves, you have people who believe in themselves, and now you have a vision of the future, and you feel open that you can move towards that with a good team. Now also remember that the transformational leadership has an indirect effect on affective-based trust, which is the other type of trust that we talked about. That is specifically in the realm of psychological safety. If a leader is encouraging critical thought and encourage you to challenge the status quo, if the leader themselves has some unconventional thoughts, or they kind of go against the norm and their behavior is maybe even a little bit weird, not bad way, but that they themselves actually kind of push you and challenge you to get outside the box and think differently about a problem, that's also going to help you feel more safe to bring out your own views, because if they have their own views and they encourage you to bring out your views, then you're going to, and that's that psychological safety. And lastly, the leader is seen as a change agent, right? They are someone who doesn't accept what is handed to them. They have a lot of critical thought, they have the charisma to support it, they encourage you as the follower to also put forth your ideas, so you have this psychologically safe environment indirectly through what the transformational leader is doing. So that's kind of in the nutshell, like exactly what the transformational leader is doing to have this positive influence on creativity. This isn't quite as in depth as the last video, but this one's a little bit more straightforward. If you look at those 4 components of transformational leadership, you can see how that type of leader is going to have a positive influence on the creativity of their team. right? If they are a good role model, if they make people feel like they're attached to a higher purpose, if they encourage you to challenge the status quo, and they also coach and mentor you to do that, that's going to create a good, safe environment where you feel like you can speak your mind, speak your thoughts. All right, so a couple things that you can do right now. I call them hacks just because they're quick, easy ways for leaders to start to develop the critical thinking skill within their followers. And it's really going to come back to usually asking questions. One of the best questions to ask is why, and that shouldn't be much of a surprise, but what I found is a lot of people will bring you a fact, and you can just ask, well, why is that true? Consider, if you're maybe a part of an organization and there's, rules and regulations, and, sometimes it'll go back to that as one of my favorite ones, where someone will say, well, it's in the rule book. Okay, great. Why is it in the rule book? And usually you'll get a pretty blank stare, because usually people don't question the rule book or the organizational, regulations. Well, it's just a regulation. It's what we have to do. Well, why do we have to do it that way? That will force people to think about why we do what we do, and doesn't make sense. Right? Because if it doesn't make sense, maybe that's something that I wouldn't say necessarily just break the rules, but then you can go and challenge that rule. You as the leader can now go ask questions and say, why is this rule is hurting us? Why we have to keep on doing it that way? And it's one way to break through one of my least favorite phrases in the entire world, and that is, we've always done it that way. That is not a creative way to think. That is not a way that I would encourage leaders to think. We need to keep on moving forward and consider how to do things better. If the way we've always done it is actually the best way to do something, then that's great. But if we just do it that way because we've always done it, that's not a good enough answer. And usually when you ask why to your people and get them to start thinking about why, that's that critical thinking. Another one of my favorite questions to ask is, are you sure? This one is especially effective with newer people, or people who have been there maybe obviously depends on the organization, but maybe 6 to 12 months, and they're starting to feel more confident and comfortable with themselves. And I'm not trying to do this to be mean, but they come in and they give you a fact, and you just kind of say, are you sure? And usually if you because you're the leader and you're in a little bit of a position of power, if you are questioning whether or not they're sure, especially if you say it the right way, say it like that that's not the answer, even if that is the answer, what that will do is cause the person to check themselves and make sure that they're not just giving you their opinion or hearsay or something they heard, they actually know the truth. So this is a good way to kind of force people to think a little bit. And then my last one, my favorite one actually, is I call it the shrug. And this one is really more of a confidence builder, but it also can increase some critical thought as well. Someone will come to you and say something like, the research shows that the market is doing this, right? And they'll kind of look at you for validation, right? And I don't like to typically give validation in that sentence or in that situation, because I want them to validate themselves. I want them to have their own confidence. I don't want them to rely on me for their confidence. So typically they'll say something like, whatever it is, and they'll look at me and go, right? Or I don't know. And I usually, you can get mixed responses sometimes, and people need to know you a little bit so you don't come off as kind of a jerk. But it's a great tool to kind of force the person to go be confident themselves. And then I usually go back, an hour or so later and just explain, hey man, there's a reason why I just shrugged at you, is I want you to, learn things yourselves and be confident in your own statements. So that's why I did that. So that way maybe you can not be a jerk if you just shrug at someone. But I do enjoy doing that. It forces someone to go and find their own confidence, and that's a big thing for me. All right, so we talked about transformational leadership today, how those 4 components kind of break down and help you teach critical thought and allow your people to be more creative. So for you, keep on displaying, or if you're not, start displaying, or at least learn what transformational leadership is, how do you employ it, and then also how do I better teach critical thinking skills to my folks. And remember that, in my opinion, critical thought is really kind of a prerequisite to problem solving, and problem solving is a prerequisite for creativity. I don't think you have great creativity without problem solving. So these 2 methods of transformational leadership and teaching critical thought are great ways to improve the creativity for your people. That being said, there is a caveat. Transformational leadership does come with a little asterisk on it, a little caution sign that, you know, there's possibly some things that can happen within transformational leadership that are not necessarily what you want as a leader. That will be episode 4, so stay tuned for that. That will be coming as soon as I shoot it, which should be sometime next week.